Because there's people out there who hate. We don't hate. They call us irredeemables, but we know we're redeemable, right? They don't understand that, but we're redeemable. And we're smelly because we're not perfect people, right? So let's just remember that. So when we had that Laura Loomer event last month, the Post-Bulletin tried its best, Med City Beat tried its best, or worst, shall we say, to shut it down. They try to shut down free speech because they can't engage with facts, reason, and evidence. They just want it to be shut down. Ron's topic tonight is about United Nations 1618. And that's all about limiting your speech. If they can control your words, if they can control the meanings of words, they can control your speech. And then, therefore, your thoughts. And if they can control your thoughts, they can eventually control your actions, right? Political correctness, therefore, is not about civility. Political correctness, let's remember, it's about control, right? Call you a hater, call you a sexist, a misogynist, some stamp on your forehead, you're an Islamophobe, some kind of stamp that defines you with an insult. But those words are meant to make you fearful and shameful about speaking out and acting out against things you know are wrong, right? So when I read the Post-Bulletin and they can't seem to remember what they've done last month to shut down a free speech event, and they've tried and they succeeded in shutting, they get people fired, right? They end careers. They don't just shut. They go after you at your place of employment. They try to get you to lose your job because you do a free speech event, right? So the Post-Bulletin reminds me of something that I think my grandma, I'm not sure why she told me this in particular, but she said, Wes, it's okay to talk to yourself, and it's okay to answer yourself back. But if you need to ask yourself to repeat what you just said, you have a problem. The Post-Bulletin can't get its own story straight, its own narrative straight. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight, because it's an act of disobedience and defiance to show up as an irredeemable and a deplorable. I would like to introduce Beverly Snow, who is the head of the Wabasha BPOU, the Wabasha GOP. We're very honored to have the presence of such a dignitary in the house tonight. The dignitary, what should I say?
That's fine.
Activist. She was up there at the state fair when the Democrats attacked the booth, right?
No.
You weren't there that night?
I was just made knowledge of it immediately.
Okay. Now, she's going to say a few words, and then the real show, the real evening begins, because Bev's going to lead us in the pledge and the prayer and a number of other things. And let me just give you Bev Snow, ladies and gentlemen. Bev Snow!
Well, I hope you can hear me all right. I'm used to not having a mic. Anyway, I am Bev Snow. I am the chair of the Wabasha County Republicans. I have worked very closely with Wes and the rest of the group over the last year and a half. And we've done a lot of presentations like this. We're just getting more and more to the point where our presentations are more about what we can do to stop the problems instead of hearing about the problems, because we all know what they are. In my work with Wabasha County, I want to inform you that we are having a big presidential banquet on September 28th at the Zumbro Community Church, where we hold a lot of our events. And that banquet is going to celebrate every Republican president, but it's going to be a real big celebration on President Trump. And I have tickets with me if anybody's interested. It's $50 for an individual, but if you got a good friend, a wife, a boyfriend, a husband, a granddaughter, if you just have anybody that would want to join you We have what we call our couples tickets, and those are $85 for 2 people to come, so it's a little bit of a savings. We're having prime rib from Wanamingo Meat and Catering, and baked potato salad, all the sides like that, and we're having cheesecake for dessert. But the big thing that we're having is we're having Trevor Loudon come in to speak. And so he'll be our keynote speaker for that night, and I'm certain that everybody in this room, you wouldn't be here if you weren't interested in subjects like that what Trevor will do. So I encourage you to look into it more. We have an event page and Eventbrite. We also have our Wabasha County page, and we do this with Goodhue County. It's a joint effort. And so Goodhue County also is selling tickets too. So that's enough of what we're doing in Wabasha right now. We are also in the future going to be selling some Trump guns that were made specifically for Trump. One is, the first one coming up, we'll have it at the banquet, is a .45 handgun, 1911. And tickets are $20 a ticket till we sell 400. If a person buys $100 worth, and I had this the other night, one young lady bought $100 worth, so she got her 5 tickets for the $100 and got a 6th ticket free, so that she has a little bit of an edge by doing that. But it's a beautiful gold-plated pistol, and it's got the White House on it, Air Force One on it, Statue of Liberty, says right across the top, "Make America Great Again," and I think it has either 2 coins or 1 coin of President Trump, and then a lot of other beautiful items on there. So the gun will be at the banquet for anyone that wants to see it too. So with the ending of that, would we all stand and bow our heads in prayer? Heavenly Father, as we always ask that your divine intervention is with us when we start these programs, please look over us, help us to understand and clearly learn what we can do in the future so that we can save our freedom and we can live here in the United States the way the United States Constitution reads, and keep us happy, keep us peaceful. Let us not react to those that are against us, but rather wrap our arms around them and tell them how much better it will be if we continue with these efforts. In God's name we pray. Amen. The flag is here, so will you join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for being here. Just take it away.
Take it away. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Branstner. Some of the faces in here I do know, some I recognize from different events from Wabasha and different locations. It's very seldom I get to speak in Rochester. Actually, it's the first time I've spoken around Rochester. But when I do a presentation, there are certain cities that I have to be prepared for in a very big sense. And one of those cities is Rochester, for a lot of reasons that many of you do not know. How many of you live in Rochester? Most of you in this room? Well, you know, we build this event as hate speech or free speech tonight for a reason, because much of our liberties are being taken away from us in a lot of different ways. I'm going to show you why today. When you get done, you're going to find out things that you never knew about. When you're talking about hate speech or free speech, it implies a lot of different things, because that is the First Amendment. Freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom to petition your own government. And every time we go and we do something, something tries to upset the apple cart to try to not make that happen. I've been shut down. Doing this same presentation, I was shut down in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. When they found out I was coming there, I was at the History Club and they shut it down. Immediately we had to go 27 miles out there. And I was talking about the First Right Amendment. So how many of you have ever been shut down either in a conversation or in a public event? You kind of realize, my gosh, our liberties are slowly being taken away from us, one step at a time. And why Rochester to me is like ground zero is because there is a lot of things happening here with your politics and your city government that people don't even know about, especially the mayor, the past mayor, Brady, and the new mayor, which is Norton, right? Yeah. And we're going to get into that in a little bit because they're writing resolutions into your city charter which have to do with the United Nations. Most people don't even know that they're even been written into it. I spoke about this about, a year ago, and I started showing these documentations at the city council of what they wrote into, which is the Charter of Compassion, which comes right out of the United Nations, where they're trying to stifle free speech. And you have it written right in your comprehensive plan in Rochester, which was written in 1999. They added to that this past year. They added and adopted this Charter of Compassion. And if you look at, that was one of them, and then also the Council of Europe. And I'm going to show you why these are important. I got that a little mixed up there. The Council of Europe is the one that's taking your freedom of speech away. The Charter of Compassion is another resolution that they wrote, where the United Nations is trying to go to a one world government. They're trying to basically take away a one world, make a one world religion. They actually they designated 7 different points of the Charter of Compassion. That's also been written in a resolution in Rochester. And most people don't even know that even happened. And I'm going to show you that also a little bit. So a lot of things are happening here. I believe this is ground zero. And we're going to just start off with just what we were talking about. So I'm going to ask you as I go here, if you're looking at these two and you look at them and you say Omar, which is down in Minneapolis, and Trump, would you say which one is hate speech and which one is free speech? If I looked at Omar, would you say hate speech or free speech? Hate speech. Many say it is free speech. And then Trump, most would say, depending on where you're at, hate speech. But in fact, they both fall under the First Amendment of the Constitution. They both are free speech. You can talk and say just basically whatever you want as long as it doesn't incite any violence or harm. So what they say, neither one of them is against the Constitution, because hate speech is protected under free speech. So they can say what they want. It's a protected right as long as nothing is in violation of hurting another person or violating another person's rights. If I was to say the Bible to the Quran, what would you say, hate speech or free speech? So if I said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the truth, the way, and the light, would that be hate speech or free speech? It's free speech, and it is legal. Under Islamic law, if I said Jesus is the only way to heaven, and the truth, the way, and the light, that is considered hate speech in parts of the world now. Because you can't say that because it's derogatory towards Islam. So yes, in the United States, it is legal to say those things. But as we get into this, you're going to find out they're writing initiatives that protect the Quran and not the Bible in the United States in certain areas. I'm going to be showing you this in documents that most people do not even know exist. If I said the Confederate flag, most would say that is hate speech, even though it is part of the history of the United States. If I said the Nazi flag, most people would say that's hate speech because of what happened during World War II the concentration camps. But if I said to you, is the middle flag, is the Somalian flag, would you say hate free speech or free speech? I mean, you think about it, the Somali population had slavery even to this day. They were from a civil war. Does that resemble anything like the Confederate flag? They had the same thing, a civil war, they had slavery, in fact, they don't like Christians and Jews, but yet they can wave that on the 4th of July. They have no problem waving that in Somali Independence Day in the United States. And Governor Walz is out there waving that flag with them, telling we should have Somali Independence Day in Minnesota. Yet it's got a war-torn country, it's got a civil war, it despises Jews and Christians, and it has slavery, but yet it's okay to wave the Somali flag. I wrote a big article today. It's half the page in the St. Cloud Times on that particular article. So you guys get a chance to read it today. It's a big article. It explains everything of what I just shared with you. I was amazed the St. Cloud Times printed it, but they finally printed it today. So if you get a chance. So we look at this: the Constitution versus Sharia. The Constitution versus Sharia. The Constitution gives us our rights to have free speech. But in many parts of the world where Islamic law is present, Sharia says that man-made laws are forbidden. It says it right in their Constitution, right in the Sharia. Man-made laws are forbidden. So if you take 1.8 billion people in the world, they say that the Constitution is a document that should be destroyed by their own religion and their own documentation. So is it free speech or hate speech? Well, the Constitution says it is free speech to preach Islamic law. Even though Islamic law says the Constitution is detrimental to their way of life. But we still give it the opportunity to talk about it and being able to go out into the public as long as it doesn't what? Harm anybody. So which one is hate speech or free speech? That really is where you come from, isn't it? If I was an Islamic person, I would say the Constitution is hate speech. If I was, which I am, a constitutionalist, a United States citizen, I would say the Sharia law would be hate speech. One cannot live under the same umbrella as the other. William Gladstone, the president of England, he's 1920s, he said they can't live under each other. Winston Churchill says the two cannot be under the same umbrella. Jefferson said it, and so did Adams. They all said neither one of these two can live under the same umbrella at the same time. The only reason they are working right now is because the numbers are much lower in the United States for Islam. It says right in the Quran, in verse 435, when your numbers reach a certain level, you must what? You must start subjugation. And there's 5 different levels to do that. So, to get there, and the final level is the hand or the sword. So, again, hate speech or free speech, that's where you come from and what part of the spectrum you're on. But in the United States, we give that free speech to allow that. As I said, I speak all over the state, Wisconsin, South Dakota, and where I go, if my name is even mentioned, I have to basically be underground. To go into the newspapers is almost forbidden, because the newspapers will try to shut me down. Wherever I go, I am being followed by what? I am being followed by organizations that probably most likely have a fatwa on my life. You guys know what a fatwa is? A fatwa is a death sentence. Chances are I do have a death sentence on my life. The reason I know this is because I got the personal email through somebody, and this is an email right from CARE's website. You know who CARE is? Council of Affairs of Islamic Relations in Minnesota. Very backed by our own politicians. They work with legislation in Minnesota, who was ranked the 82nd most powerful terrorist organization in the world by the United Arab Emirates. They were on the Holy Land Trial Foundation as a terrorist organization. They are part of Hamas. Their director wrote an email, sent this out, and this is where, if you look at the map there, these are places that many of us have spoke. And as you can see, my name's down there at the bottom. They've mapped me out to where I'm at. They don't have everywhere I spoke because now I go underground. I have to live underground. To talk about free speech, I have to go underground because they will try to shut me down. Usama Dakda, Sharam Hadian, many of us are all being shut down, and we're being mapped out and we're being followed wherever we go by Islamic groups, even if I talk strictly about the Constitution. Newspapers will shut me down. I can't speak in any college or in any high school. They shut me down. Even if I want to just talk about the Constitution, because my name has been so indignant to society. They're shutting me down everywhere. And this is going on with not just me. We've got speakers who went from Muslim to Christians, and they want to speak at college and talk about their transformational of their Christian beliefs, and they're being shut down. So we're seeing this, and we are being followed everywhere. These groups here, now I made their own personal website. This is another one they put out to the public. You see many of these, there's Mr. Johnson, there's many of you probably recognize that are being shut down. This is actually on the Islamic sites, the people that they have to stop. And I went, and the one that you saw just prior to that, this is their personal website. These are the speakers they have to stop. Okay, so this is happening throughout Minnesota. I mean, you think about it, this is happening throughout Minnesota. This is your state. This is a constitutional society, and we are being shut down at every different avenue. And if you look at the First Right Amendment, we have these 5 here. Freedom of exercise of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. We really don't have freedom of the press, do we?
No.
Freedom to assemble. You know, you talk to Wes here, he's having a difficult time even getting people to these events because he has to work almost underground or try to figure out a way to do this without causing any attention to him. And then there's people that want to come here, but they're so afraid that what? We're going to go there, there could be what? Violence. There's something could be happening. We don't want to be around those deplorables. So they're shutting down your freedom or right to assemble. People stay at home. I don't want to go there. I want to go there, but I don't want to go there. They're afraid to come to these events. And to petition your own government, how many of you ever tried to petition your own government and ask them about what I've just spoke about? Ask them about why we have a refugee resettlement program and we don't bring in any Christians that were being killed overseas. Why they're limited to less than 1%. And you get no answers. You petition your government and you get nothing. You get silenced. You get silenced in the newspaper. So we're seeing this, and there's people like myself, Wes, and Bev, and many of us, we go out there. I am not afraid. Zero. I am not afraid. I will go out there. I will continue to do this. But we're starting to see the crowds getting smaller and smaller because people are really starting to be subjugated. They're getting weaker, and they're saying, I can't beat this. In fact, I always tell people, the strongest offense that you have is the Constitution. This guy right here, Constitution. You can't lose on this. There's not an argument that you have that if you stick by this that you will never lose. Because the opposition who are trying to shut you down are working outside the scopes of the Constitution. It is not law. There's nothing lawful about shutting speech down. There's nothing. But yet we are afraid and we don't stick by what we actually have in writing. The longest written document ever in the world's history is the United States Constitution. Almost the most unbreakable Constitution in the United States. And they're tearing this apart slowly through initiatives, by way of the United Nations, and they're writing regulations into your system. And remember, laws are created by Congress. They're not created by policy, which is 501c3s and NGOs, local governments, who create these initiatives in your city, which you're seeing, and I'm going to show you, you're seeing in Rochester, you're seeing all these initiatives through resolutions, but they're not law. Congress makes law. Congress has to stay within the realm of the Constitution. Because something happens in your city and it's here 20 years, and the kids grow up with it, that's the way we've always done it. But if it's not a law, it's not the way it should be done. So, under the Refugee Resettlement Act, and I'm just going to give you some history, under the Refugee Resettlement Act, refugees are a protected class worldwide. How many of you knew that? The United Nations Human Rights, 90% of the Refugee Resettlement Program are all SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, under the United Nations. There are 90% of them are under human rights. They're not laws. They don't apply here in the United States. They're under a doctrine of human rights. Refugees and immigrants are entitled to the same universal human rights and fundamental freedoms, which must be respected, protected, and fulfilled at all times. However, migrants and refugees are a distinct group governed by a separate legal framework. So you have your Constitution, which says under the 14th Amendment that we're all equal under the law, right? So how is that if we go under the United Nations High Commissioners of Refugees that we have separate but equal? Immigrants are refugees and distinct groups governed separate legal framework. You can't have a legal framework for immigrants and refugees. It doesn't work. That's against the law. It's against the 14th Amendment. We are all under, there's no such thing as separate but equal. And that's what we're seeing. We're allowing the United Nations to say they're in here, but they got separate laws for them. You notice that many crimes happen, they happen, and all of a sudden it's never reported in the newspaper. They are totally classified under a different program, and they don't want you to know exactly what's happening. So, let's get into the United Nations, where the crux of all of this is happening. Where does all of this originate? And it originates from the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, out of the United Nations. Back in 2007, everybody in the world was considered even playing. They had a vote. And the Europeans did not like this vote. They opposed it, and they fought it as far as they could fight it. But they were overwhelmed by the OIC. Does everybody know what the OIC means? Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Out of 178 heads of state at the United Nations, it's about 190 now, but at that time it was 178. 57 of those heads of state are the OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the largest voting bloc, and they vote as a unit. So when they vote together under Islamic law in the United Nations, so they have much power. They voted in Pakistan, pushed us forward in 2007, that on the 18th of December 2007, the Assembly adopted a resolution combating defamation of religion. And it says 108 to 51, and as you read here, it says, the resolution expressed deep concerns about the negative stereotypes of religion and manifestation of intolerance and discrimination, matters of religion beliefs, but the only religion mentioned name was Islam. So when they voted on this, it said what the resolution did was in effect give Islam human rights status, something that should only be accorded to human rights, not an ideology or religion. So when you condemn or when you say I don't like Islam or I oppose what they do, you can't say I oppose a Muslim. When you oppose one, you oppose 1.8 million. They took 1.8 billion and they made them into one. They are now one as a unit. So if I say I don't like this, I condemn all. But if I said I don't like him because the color of his skin, I condemn one. They passed this at the United Nations. You condemn one, you condemn 1.8 billion. And this was passed under the United Nations resolutions and the human rights. So they are considered as one entity. Affect one, you affect 1.8 billion. The only religion or culture in the world that has this classification. And now when you go outside of that and you go to certain countries, there are certain countries that are adopting this same mantra of hate speech against Islam. And one of them is Canada. They passed a motion called M103, which is you cannot condemn Islam in any way. If you do, there could be a fine or you could be thrown in jail. They passed this in certain parts of Islam. In certain parts of Canada, M103. Now, not all of Canada, this is mostly in the eastern side, where the French control the Quebec side. But this is becoming very powerful, and the Islamic culture under free speech have now got a foothold on Canada now on free speech. It's very difficult to even say anything about Islam in Canada now. Defamation of character, and you can be thrown in jail. It's coming to the United States fourfolds. And I'm going to show you documentation that most of you probably never seen before. Hillary Clinton, in 2011, Secretary of State, went to a 3-day closed-door meeting with Medlin Exadoglu, President of Turkey. Very powerful man. He also sits at the Secretary General of the United Nations. So he's sitting right there in the middle. Hillary Clinton's there. They're trying to convince Hillary that if she accepts Islam as being one and the defamation of Islam, they can push hate speech against Islam, because the only country that they cannot get through to is the United States because of what? The Constitution. The Constitution would never allow you to have that ability to make one classification of any group. Hillary Clinton stated that she knew it would never pass the United States, because it would never pass the First Right Amendment. She was pretty determined, and she told them it would never pass in the United States. 3-day closed-door meeting, she came out and she signed an agreement on defamation of Islam, and she brings it and she signs it, and she agrees with them, defying the U.S. Constitution, called United States